welcome to A Writer's Perspective. Today's guest is author Tracey Livesay. Tracey is the 2021 Emma Award winner for Best Interracial Romance for Like Lovers Do, which was also named one of the 100 Best Fiction Books of 2020 by Kirkus Reviews. Her upcoming novel, American Royalty, a dangerously sexy rom-com that evokes the real-life romance between Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan Markle, is one of the most anticipated books of 2022. A former criminal defense attorney, Tracey lives in Virginia with her husband, who she met on the very first day of law school, and their 3 children. Please help me in welcoming Tracey Livesay. Hello, Tracey. Welcome to A Writer's Perspective. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Lita. Thank you for asking me. I'm so excited.
Oh, me too. I haven't seen you in a while. The time I saw you was at the Lady Jane Salon.
Yes, in Silver Spring. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I don't even remember when that was.
I think I started them like in 2017.
So I think it might have been 2018.
Right. I think you were one of my first ones though. So I started late in 2017, like August, September. So you probably came in towards the early part of 2018.
That sounds about right, yeah.
So tell me, so when did you decide that you wanted to be a writer? How did it come about?
You mean like professionally, like wanting to pursue this as a
Author.
career?
Yes.
That happened, oh, that's a good question. Okay, so this is what I would say. I would say that I thought about it and dabbled a little bit in the early 2000s.
Okay.
I've always been a reader. One of my earliest memories is of my dad reading to me every night. At that time, that was our thing. And we had these childcraft book sets. They're sort of like encyclopedias, but they were for kids. And they would have, there was like 20 something volumes, and each volume was a different thing. I remember the first volume was rhymes and poems. And then the second volume was fables and stories. And those 2 were my favorites. And so my earliest memories of my dad reading to me stories from the stories and fables childcraft. And I've always been a reader. I've always had a book in my hand. That is just my earliest memory. I was introduced to romance when I was about 12. And I mean, it changed my life. Like, I'm sure you've heard this story over and over again. I never looked back. And so I loved reading them. I don't think, even as I like inhaled them, that I thought that was a job. I mean, I didn't put the 2 things together. And to be honest, in my family, that wouldn't have been an option. I was, a little Black girl. I was a smart little Black girl, like I said, because I was reading at a very young age. I started school because of where my birthday falls. I actually should have started school a year later. My dad actually put me in private school so that I could start school when he wanted me to, when I was ready to start school.
Right.
And so education was very important to me. And it was sort of drummed into me at a young age, education, you'll go to school, you'll go to college, there will be something beyond that. And for a long time, we thought it was going to be medical school. So there was no sort of path where a writer was going to happen. So for me, reading was just fun. It was a hobby. It was something I loved to do.
It was the beginning.
And I, as a kid, I did write. I wrote poetry. I wrote short stories. I wrote plays for church. And I remember in college, I tried to write romance. They're really hard. They are difficult to write. But I would write these little like 4-chapter romances because the setup is easy and they're going to end up together. The middle part is difficult. So I was like, I'm not even trying to attempt the middle part. I'm just going to like write the setup and then they're going to kiss and then they're going to end up together.
We ever after.
Yeah, so I did, I did a few of those. And again, I was just, going on the path that was laid out to me. So the first time I think I ever knew that that was a possibility or dabbled into it was I'd gotten a copy of Romantic Times
Oh
magazine.
yeah.
Yes, and
They don't
so
make that. They don't publish that anymore,
they
right?
don't. No, they don't. So this was in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly I realized there was this entire industry. And it was also what introduced me to Romance Writers of America.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, my husband and I were living in Fairfax. So I went to a meeting of Washington romance writers.
Mm-hmm.
I went to several, and that gave me the thought that at the time I was working as an attorney. We didn't have children, so I was like, oh, I can go to work during the day, and maybe I will try to write afterwards. In the evenings or on the weekends. Well, a couple of years later, I got pregnant and had kids, and that just all sort of flew out the window. It really just felt like an entirely different life. I don't know, people who can write with young children, God bless them,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it was so encompassing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had 3 kids under the age of 4, so it was just,
Wow.
yeah. So, but the thing that was constant during that time was reading. I just, the books just kept me grounded, and I loved them, and they were happily ever afters. And I just, devoured them once again. Then when my youngest son was getting ready to start preschool, I had ended up staying at home with my kids. I had been at home with them for a long time. And I was like, I've got to get back out.
Right.
I felt like people only knew me as like either like Trey's mother or Jim's wife. Like no one knew me anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I figured I would go back to work, which, I could do. I'd kept up everything I needed for my law license. But there was just also this little thing that just wouldn't let go, that was like, well, if you ever wanted to be a writer, this might be the time.
Yeah.
And we had been living off my husband's income for years. So I essentially went to him and said, our youngest is starting preschool. Um, I am ready to sort of go back out into the world again. I can go back and apply for, law jobs, but I would really like to give writing a try. And I understand what I'm asking, but it's something I really want to try to do. And he was so supportive. He said, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. And that was the beginning. It was full steam ahead once he said, go for it.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice. That's it. It helps. It helps, especially when you're in a relationship, you're married or you're seeing someone. It helps to have that support system, and having children. That's on top of that. What happened to your first draft?
Okay, so so the books I tried to write back in the early aughts, I actually still have those on my computer. One will never see, people say this, but it will never see the light of day. I'm embarrassed actually sometimes to go back and look at it. But one of the things, because at that time when I was starting, paranormal was huge. So,
Okay.
and some of the advice young authors got was write to the market. So if paranormal is huge, maybe you should write paranormal. I wrote a paranormal with the idea that it would be a series. And it was really interesting listening to your interview with Jen Bach, who I love.
Oh my, yeah, JT Bach. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
love her, because that series is similar in a lot of ways to what to her series, because I too am married to a husband who loves all Marvel, DC, comic, like all of that stuff too. And so at the
Oh,
time, it
that's
was like,
funny.
oh, that might be an interesting way to sort of get into paranormal through this door, which she did
Right.
fabulously. Um, that one I looked at several years ago. I just I like the idea. Maybe, I'm not going to say no to that. That might be one that in a few years, if I'm like tired of what I'm doing and want
Right.
something different, I might try.
Right.
Might try
So
to
you're
test
so
it
you're
out.
not against changing genres, um, or subgenres, because it could still be a romance, but it could be a sci-fi
Right. It's definitely romance. So it would be like a paranormal
romance.
sci-fi romance.
Okay.
I if I did it, I think I would probably get a pen name. I would probably do it under a different name.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. I'm the rebel. If you tell me you're doing romance, you can't do sci-fi. I'll be like, oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do sci-fi. It may
Right.
have romance in it, but I'm gonna do sci-fi and with
Right.
my name.
Right.
I
Yes.
did write an article a long time ago about pseudonyms.
Mhm.
And at the time, I had asked several of the WRW ladies that used pseudonyms, the pros and cons
Mhm.
about it. But I don't remember much of it now because we're talking over 15 years ago, maybe,
Yeah.
that I wrote this article.
And I feel like it's a lot of work, especially now for what they require us to do. I would use a pseudonym because I feel like I've sort of built up a specific brand with Tracy Livesay.
That's
But the other thing I would say is if I put it up, I, it wouldn't be the same presence that I have
right.
personally because that's too much work and I can barely keep up with just me. No, I just, I
Uh,
just, yeah, I just wouldn't want someone who has, have read, maybe by that time 10 books expecting a certain thing to then have it be something else.
right.
But yeah, I mean, and who knows? This is all guessing. I have no.
Right. Do you tend to follow the rules in terms of, for example, if the industry is now saying let's let's write paranormals.
Mhm.
That's all we're looking for is paranormal. Do you then do you switch immediately to a paranormal if you want to get it published within that time, the year?
Right.
So
No.
you continue with your contemporary romance and try, to sell that.
Yeah.
So are you indie published, self-published, or are you traditionally published?
I am traditionally published.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're
Yes. I
traditional.
have I have dipped my toe into self-publishings. I've done, a couple of anthologies,
Okay,
and I have the rights back to several of those stories. And on my to-do list is to try to self-pub.
awesome.
That's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
Just-
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it
yeah.
is. And you got preteens and they have lives, and you have to stop and go to soccer game, and it is a lot of work. But I mean, I'm self-published,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I to me it's easy. You know,
Yeah, and I think that works with like personality types and sort of what it is you want to do. And I know a lot of people love self-pub because it gives them a control that they don't have with
right?
traditional published.
Yeah,
And at this point, I'm the type of all I really want to do is write my stories. All of the other stuff, is cake. And there are things that I do enjoy doing. Like I love these conversations. I love, especially when they're with people that I know and we can
right,
talk.
right.
Like I enjoy doing these things. There are things that I don't particularly like so much that aren't things that I enjoy. I would just prefer to just write my story and turn it in and have someone deal with everything else. And so
Right.
traditional is the closest I get to that at this
Yeah,
point.
there's a lot of authors that do like that because of that, because
Yeah.
they can write it, they can just then hand it over. The editor will look at it, come back with edits, you fix, and then you send it off. I know that it's, in the publishing industry has changed a lot too, in terms of now they ask the author to do a lot of the marketing. It's almost like the marketing budget got cut off. right? And they're like, all of a sudden they're like, okay, here you go, mark it. It's
Right.
like, but wait, you're getting a percentage. What are you doing?
I didn't say it, you did, but
I
that's how
know,
I feel.
right? It's the
Yes.
truth. It's the
When
truth.
I started, like for real, like after the kids, and this is what I was wanting to do, I went to RWA. We had moved, so at that point, Virginia was closer, so I would drive to Richmond, and so I was a member of Virginia Romance Writers, and I kept my Washington romance, but
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
was closer for me to drive to Richmond.
Yeah.
But it was extremely helpful, and I wouldn't have been published without them. But again,
Hmm.
as we were talking before we started recording, the industry had been going along a certain way for a very long time, right?
Hmm.
And in just like 3 to 4 years, everything changed. Like you didn't know. And so there was a period of time where the organization that stood for romance writers was looking at this new way of publishing and wasn't embracing it the way
Right.
it should have, especially as
Mhm.
we look now and see sort of what has happened.
Right.
It's hard to for big ships to turn nimbly and swiftly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
And
you're right. Never thought
yeah,
about it that way.
no, but we saw it, and they had time. I mean, and I probably should not be the person having this discussion because I was involved in some of the RWA stuff. Um, but let me just say, there was time, and it could have been done. Um, it just wasn't. So
Right,
that's
right,
where
right,
we are. Yeah.
right. And I know it's changed. And again, you know, I would say for newbie writers, it's a worthwhile thing to get involved in and join, and definitely the chapters as well. But I dropped out of WRW because at one point they weren't going towards what I would have liked for them to have.
Hmm.
And I made a couple of comments, and I would have liked to have seen more of the established writers, authors, to be mentoring at
Mm.
least one member who's a newbie.
Yeah.
And they talked about doing it, but they never got around to doing it. And then they had their own ish. Something went on there as well. And I was like, for me, romance publishing, there's a lot for everybody, I think. There because Bob Mayer said it perfectly. You could take one idea and you could write a million books
Yes.
based on that one idea.
Yes.
Not everybody is going to be writing the same thing, but the themes might be the same,
Right.
but the ideas will be different.
Because we're all different, and we
They're
all
all
have
different.
different experiences, and we
Exactly.
all bring that to our writing.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so I believed in, if you're published and you're doing well, and again, I do tell people you're not going to be rich,
Right. No.
unless you're Nora Roberts. And
Unless you are, yes.
Even Nora Roberts lives a very humble, modest life. She doesn't have a mansion, folks.
Right.
She's a wonderful lady. I've met her several times. She reminds me of Susan Lucci because she's very petite,
Mm-hmm.
very sweet.
Yeah.
Love her, and I love her books. Of course, almost everybody does.
Can I
Um,
tell you, since you mentioned her, I actually had the opportunity to go sign at her
oh
bookstore.
yeah, you did.
My mother is a huge Nora Roberts fan.
Yeah.
My mother, when I told her, freaked out. Came, not for me,
No.
not for
No.
me.
No.
She came for Nora Roberts. Nora was so gracious. She
Oh
took
my
a
God.
picture with her. She autographed her books. But yes, my mother was like, "Oh, you're signing? Lovely. Where's Nora?" Like,
Oh yeah. See you later, honey.
see you later. Yes,
Nora.
Nora. Yes, that's all she cared about.
She's Laura's amazing, and I asked her. I said, okay, you're at a point in your life where you could just give it all up and be live happy, be mean self-sufficient, and you don't need any income. Why do you do it? Why do you keep doing it? And she said, the readers
Mhm.
keep me going. And I thought that was just such a great, very simple, nothing fancy answer.
Right.
The readers. And it's true. It's true. You want to get readers.
Yeah.
You want them to love your stories. So anyway, so these groups are very important for newbies to join.
Yes.
Let me ask you, change things a little bit, going back to your books. Um, what would you what would you what would you consider, or what kind of error did you make in the beginning at the start of your career that you now know you wish you knew something else in order not to go to that? I don't think I worded it right.
No, I think I understand. Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. I think the one mistake I would say is I didn't trust myself enough in the beginning.
Okay.
And I don't think that's unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you were trying to get published. When I was doing it, it was right before self-pub. I think self-pub like became huge right as my first couple of books came out. So before then, there really was just one path. It was traditional being
Right. Exactly.
published.
That's right.
And there were, you had to, have an agent, unless you wanted to write for Harlequin, which I did. But I also knew my plan had been to go to single title. So I wanted an agent to go on the whole journey with me. But that there are people that you have to sort of impress, gatekeepers you have to get past to
Yeah.
get to be
Yeah.
published. And so when you are when that is what you want to do and those are the people you have to get past, it makes you more susceptible to when people say you have to have this, or you have to be this, or you have to do this. And I always knew that the stories I write would feature Black heroines because that's what I was. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have much of that growing up, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean that was never an issue.
Right.
um and even though it feels like it's very popular now and it's everywhere now, interracial wasn't very
Right.
popular back then
Mm-hmm.
either.
No. No. No.
And while I did not change that part of my writing, there were times where it was suggested that I not write those things.
I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, um, I had, an agent who, was very supportive of me, but also there was something about starting a little bit later in life, having had another career. So it was a new industry to me, and I
Right.
was still getting my feet about me, which is
Mm-hmm.
part of what I, attribute that not fully believing and trusting in my instinct and my voice. But it's hard,
Right.
especially there's a goal. I'm a goal oriented person, and I wanted to do this thing, and people were like, okay, but the only way you can do this thing is if you change, certain things about what you're doing. And, now I'll just be like, no,
So,
it's not an issue.
it
But
is. It
back then
is.
I thought about it. I
Right.
considered, yeah.
Yeah, it was a hard, because growing up in the 70s, late 70s, mid to late 70s is when I started reading Harlequin,
Hmm.
and they were predominantly all white
Hmm.
characters, and so I can see that being a big issue when you start writing, the stories that you want to tell from your perspective, right? And I mean,
Right.
that's what writing is, from
Yes.
your perspective. Your career is also from your perspective, and so it's good to see. I was really happy when I started seeing stories about Black women falling in love with Black men,
Yes.
Black women with white men, Hispanic men, because that is a reality.
Yes.
There is, I mean, I'm mixed,
Right.
we have, Puerto Ricans, you find them in all colors. I'm serious, you do. You do. I mean, some people point, but it's true.
Yes.
You get writer's block.
I do. I do. I don't know if I would call it's if I call it writer's block. I think what happens are there are times when I don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
That, like because when I actually force myself to sit down and do the work, it comes.
Hmm.
But there are times when I just don't want to do the work. And by that I mean, I'm looking at an empty page and I've written a chapter, I have to start a new chapter. I'm looking at this at my screen. I'm like, I don't know where to write. I don't know where to go. And what that requires is me to go back and look at, because I am a plotter, it would require me to go back and look at my character stuff and figure out what's the motivation, what's going to happen next. Like that requires me to do some work.
Right.
And when I don't feel like doing work,
It's hard.
it's hard,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so that's what for me writer's block is. I'm tired, I'm
Hmm.
drained,
Hmm.
I'm just not in the mood, and so I
Yeah.
can't do the work.
Right.
But what typically happens is, in the past, I would beat myself up over it. Now
Right.
I realize I think that's just part of my process, and I have to give myself a break. And 99% of the time, it just takes time. And what will happen is overnight, something will jiggle loose, and the next morning, when I sit down and I say to myself, "Okay, you have to do the work," it comes.
Right. Right.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
a lot of stuff I think comes with time, and the more you write, the more you sort of learn yourself and what your process is and what you need, and but all of that takes time.
It
It just
takes time and it's a lot of work. So if you're, for the writer who's, wants to give up at the first
yeah, you
shade, then you're not meant to be a
yeah,
writer.
and
No,
you would never get through it because
no, no.
I don't know anyone who has had the experience. Maybe they were lucky on one book, like they say, when it flows from you,
Yeah,
but like for most of us,
yeah,
it's work and it rarely flows, and you just have to trust and you have to put in the work, and
right.
you have to love it.
Yeah. So how
Yeah.
many books have you published so far?
Oh, let me think.
Because you got American Royalty,
Right.
the Tycoon Socialite. That was a
Right.
series, right?
Yes, that was my first book. So it's 2, 3, 5, 7. Okay, so American Royalty will be 8, and those are all traditional published. And
Okay.
then I have done participated in one, two um anthologies.
Okay.
That's about right.
Now the
Yeah.
Billionaire's Tycoon, was that a Harlequin? Because the cover looks like a Harlequin.
I know. No, that was with Entangled.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Entangled. Are
Yes.
they still around?
They are still
Okay.
around, but
Okay.
I do not publish with them anymore. But they published my first two.
Your first two. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. What are some of the themes in your stories? Book would you recommend that I read? American Royalty or Tycoons, the
Uh,
Tycoons social
um,
guide? Because I
well,
was thinking about American Royalty.
yeah, I would say, I mean, because it's the most recent.
Right.
It's the for me, it's my favorite thing I've written. But people, it is the most recent, so it could be that. Um, but I think it's the most me in
Okay.
that it's the book that I wrote where I finally said to myself, write you. Right? Like, it doesn't matter what anyone says. It doesn't
Right.
matter. Don't think about the readers. Don't think about your editor. Don't think about how it's going to sell. Like, write the story that you want to write. This is
Okay.
your premise. Write the story.
Awesome.
And that's what I did. And so, yeah, so I would say read that one.
Okay. Check
I
that one out.
Yeah, they just put Tycoon Socialite Bride. I think it might have been either early this year, late last year on Audible, and I hadn't
Oh,
read it
really?
in years. So I listened to it, and I mean, I really enjoyed it, but it's a good book, but I can see how I pulled my punches in that book
Okay.
for the very reasons we talked about
Right.
earlier, right?
Right. Right.
Um, I can see where I pulled my punches, where I didn't delve into things, or I was trying to make it as palatable as I could so that I could get past those gatekeepers.
Right. Wow.
American Royalty, and part of that comes because, I had been published for a little bit too, but this book was just like, you either like it or you don't.
Right.
Particularly love contemporary. But if, I have a writer friend who's writing in another genre, or people are talking about a book in another genre, I will read it. I mean, I just love romance. I love the genre of romance.
Right. Right.
So,
Yes, yeah. So for me, doing this channel has really opened me up now. So so now it's like I don't have that attitude about, oh, this is not my kind of thing. I'll be like, oh, let me see,
yeah.
and what gets me is the writing. If the writing is good, the story is amazing. I want to read American Royalty because I think of Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, well,
But
see, they've been doing that on the marketing, so yeah.
yeah, right. Oh, they have. They've been saying stuff like that about the book. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I'm sure
yeah,
it's not.
yeah.
It's not like I'm not reading it because I think it's going to be a Meghan and Harry kind of thing. I
Right.
want to
Yeah,
read
no,
it because I'm
no, no.
interested.
I mean, it's inspired, but it's not,
Right,
it's not them, obviously.
right.
Yeah.
So this came out after them, right? After they were married and
Yes.
all that. Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But you have other books too about interracial relationships.
They all are.
Yeah,
My husband is white,
yeah.
and
He's in the Navy, right? Or he was.
he was, yeah,
Yeah,
he was.
I started to laugh when you made that comment about the boat turning, and I was like, okay, your man. I was going to say, I
Yes.
knew he was Navy. So I was going to say that comes from your naval husband, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes. But yes, that is true. I mean, yeah, my husband is white, and so when we were dating, I was, looking for our story in romance, which is all pretty much I was reading. And it was hard to find it. And if I did find it, it was always a story where where there are different races was the conflict of the book. And that wasn't our situation at all. And again,
Right,
I'm not, when the stories I write are just one little niche part of life, niche part of, of the genre. I'm not purporting to write for all interracial couples.
right, right. No,
I'm
you're
not
creating
all
the
Black
romance.
women. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just writing this story and hoping people enjoy it,
right.
and hoping they love the story, and they love, the happily ever after, and they love the journey. And if they get something from it, they get that Black
Love
women
conquers
are
all.
worthy of love and desire, and all the good stuff.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in love conquers all.
I think that our books help, right? I
I
think if
hope
people,
so. I hope
yeah,
so.
I think I want to believe that they do.
Yeah.
I do. I want to believe that if people are open and they read, that they will learn. They, like you said, how you were reading his book, and if you felt like you were there,
Yes.
I think we have the power to do that. And once you are sort of in someone's shoes and you see them fall in love, and you see the obstacles and
Yes.
everything they
Mm-hmm.
overcome, you realize they're not different from
Mm-hmm.
you. I mean, I do think our genre is so powerful. That's probably why, it doesn't get the respect it deserves, because, it is that powerful, and it's mostly women, and, we know
Yep.
how they
Yep.
like to denigrate
And
that.
romance novels are the biggest sellers.
They are.
They're the
They
biggest sellers. Sorry for those who don't.
who don't know. We be trying to tell y'all.
I think it's great that we're writing what we want to write.
Yes.
We feel, it's important that people see a different aspect of love. I'm excited about American Royalty. What is your regimen like? Writing regimen like?
Well, one of the things I've learned is that I'm most productive and creative in the morning. And so I'm a morning person.
Yeah.
So I do try to not like like some of my friends like Tiff Marcello who get up at like 5:30 with that writing club on. I'm not that much of a morning person.
Neither
Um,
am I.
but I do tend to be my most creative in the morning. So I try to get most of my work done then. And then if I have like appointments or things with kids or whatever, that stuff I try to get done. And then if I have some time at the end of the day, I'll try to come back and get a little bit more work done.
Okay. So once everybody's in bed,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
I'm not much of a night person, so it's the only time I would be working late at night is if I have a deadline.
Right, right.
Um, but there is like this little window of opportunity where I'm not quite sleepy, I'm not quite ready to veg, and I have some time, where it's
Okay.
not the kids or it's not my husband, that I can get back at my desk and get a little
Right,
work done.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so what works for you in terms of critiquing? Do you have beta readers? Do you have a critiquing partner? And this is like after your first or second draft, how many drafts do you do before it's ready? You think it's ready for somebody to look at?
So it all ties together. In the beginning, I was a member of a critique group. And I would not be published without that critique group, because being a part of that critique group helped me to understand what my voice was.
Okay.
I would hear that all the time at meetings, and when we had speakers come in and they'd be like, know your voice, know it. And I was like, what is voice? I don't know, but you got to know it. And I'm like,
Right, right.
it doesn't help me. But being a part of that critique group helped me to figure out what that meant and to figure out what mine was. And it was like what we were saying, we all have different experiences, and on that comes into our writing. And it just meant we could all have to write a marriage of convenience story, but the way I write it is going to be different from the way you write it. And the way I write it is my voice. It's the things that I bring to that story. And so once I got published, I have been lucky enough and fortunate enough that I have been steady in terms of being published and not being without a contract.
Okay.
And one of the things I learned is that it went fast. It went very fast in the beginning. When I was first published, romance started going through this thing, and I think it was a part of the burgeoning of self-pub too, where people were writing 3 and 4 books a year. Before that, if you wrote single title, you wrote a book a year. If you wrote for Harlequin, you maybe wrote 2 or 3 books a year.
Wow.
Nobody was writing 4, 5, 6 books a year. And yet there was this period of time, it was when my first book came out, where publishers were expecting, if you could write 4 or 5 books a year, that's what they wanted you to do. And if you were a new writer who was just getting a contract and you were finally sort of like at the table when they said, can you give me a book in 4 months? Sure, I can do a book. And I cannot do a book in 4 months.
That's my problem. I cannot do a book in 4 months.
But for the first few years after my first book came out, I was on this crazy pace. And so I did not really use critique groups or anything beyond that. And even though I am now sort of on the schedule I want to be, which is about a book a year, I still tend to not use critique groups anymore. I think it's just sort of my process has sort of evolved. And so now sort of what I do is I do that really fast draft that I just need to get the story out. That's the hardest thing for me to do, is to actually get the story on the page. I love revisions. Revision is my favorite part. So once I do that first draft and get just a story out, then I go back through one more time and I flesh everything out. And then I go back through another time to tie up any loose threads or anything I've discovered during
Let me my head away.
class.
Yeah.
So I think I probably do about 3 drafts, and that's what I
Wow.
send to my editor. And
Wow.
then she gives me her notes, and I do a final revision, and then that's the one that
Wow.
copy edit.
Do you find, I find that final revision hard.
Which one?
The one where they send you all the edits.
Oh,
I mean, I haven't done any published,
right,
I do self-publishing,
right.
but and more because I want to write what I want to write, and I rely on beta readers, book clubs, and friends, or and even then, when you publish it, somebody's going to find something with it. But then, even with the ones that are published, traditionally you find something,
Yeah.
with it. But yeah, so I find, for me, it's like if I have that, where the person comes and says, the publisher comes and says, I want 4 books, I couldn't do it. I freeze
Yeah.
under that kind of thing,
Yeah.
I'll be lucky if I get 1 book a year.
Yeah, that 1 book a year works for me. The 2017, 2018, those were rough years for me because I was trying to stick to a pace that just did not work for me because
Right.
again, I did not
Yeah.
really know my process.
Right.
And I was published. The first book I sort of went out with is the one that got my agent and got a contract. And those things are great. And I'm not going to sit here and say that that's not great. But the other part of that, again, is I didn't know myself. I didn't know my process. And
Right.
so you're just sort of like, they like the book. Can we have another one? Because now we want to have all our, want to have so many books. And you're like, I don't want to lose this contract. I just got it. So I'm going to say that
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I'm not.
Why should I not be able to write, books? Why shouldn't I be able to do it? That person can do it. Why can't I do it? And it just took time to one, understand that we're all different.
Mm-hmm.
We write different. We
Mm-hmm.
process differently.
Yeah. Yes.
It's all important.
Yeah. I often wonder if the quality of the story suffers any from being pressured to write 4 or 5 or 6 in a year. I don't know, because I haven't met anybody yet that's published 4 books in a year kind of thing.
Right.
So I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
Well, you know what? I used to think that they would, because it just seemed so inconceivable to me, because I was like, I can't do it. So I don't understand what people who can do it, what are they doing? Because I can't do it. I can't figure it out. And then I realized, as I said, I learned we are all different and we process different, and the things that we want to include in our novels are different. And so what I've come to think is that the people who can do that, they process differently. They're driven by something that I retreat from, they go towards. And then it can also be like, my stories, I tend to be very sort of emotional. I'm very inner conflict driven. And to me, that takes a lot of thinking to have everything line up. And for some authors, they are, external conflict is more important than
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah. And so it could be that their stories are more external driven,
Right.
than mine. So, yeah, that's how I've come to think about it. It's just that
Right.
we just are different. Too much and I just freeze. It's
Right.
overwhelming.
Right. No, I agree. I'm like that too. My first book, I took 11 years because it was, you put it down, you life moves on.
You work a full job.
And then the last 5 years of that 11 years was because I was scared to put it out because I didn't have a professional editor. I didn't have, the money. I just didn't. I mean, when we start, we don't have the money, and then finally it went through that, 15 women club. And then it went to another. I had a lady who was in Germany who said she was an editor in past life. She looked at it. There were two different ladies that I paid like almost $400-500 each
Ooh,
to look at it at different times.
the
And it came back
investment.
worse. I
Oh,
don't know what they did, but it came back worse. So I stopped doing that.
yeah.
And now what I'll do is I'll leave it alone for about a month or so and I'll read it again. But after a while, I mean, shoot, you can read it 20 times and you can still miss.
Because you're tired of it.
You're tired of it. And so
Tired of
finally,
it.
I blessed it
Yeah.
and I put it out. Some people liked it. One lady, I put I put the English vocabulary. I use British vocabulary. For example, jewelry is spelled Jewelry. One reader said that I didn't know how to spell.
I can't even. Oh,
So she was like, "Oh my God, the spelling is horrible." And so, that's all it goes on Amazon, and
yes.
that ruins your reputation. Your book is dead.
You know, I've read so much Harlequin growing up that for the longest time I spelled words the British way because
Right.
that's how they were.
They were,
And
yeah.
I still have like some of the first books. I remember they'd be like, it's toward, not towards, or like color or theater. That's a big one because I've forever spelled theater TRE, and they were like,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
it's TER because so much. What
Yeah.
was funny about American Royalty is because he's British, in his chapters, those words I've done that, and I wonder. I mean, like you said, people can.
I think it's awesome if you did it that way. I think that's cool. Do you have you had experiences where does the editor come back and say it doesn't have enough sex? Have you had any issues like that in any of your writing?
No, not now. Not now. Early on, um, early on, I did run into situations where I wrote something or was like giving my idea about what I wanted to write, and the editor was like, "No, this doesn't. I don't like this. I don't think this is funny. I don't think this is going to sell." And
Huh.
essentially, that's sort of what led me to sort of leave my old publisher to sign with my new publisher. And I've had the same editor for the past, I mean, I say that like it's long, but I guess it's been 5 6 years, I guess. So for the past 1 2 3 4 5 6 books, I've had the same editor, and we have built a relationship, and she knows my writing and knows my style, and so I haven't run into that
Good. That's
with
good.
her. Yeah, yeah, it's been it does make a difference when you have an editor who fights for you and who,
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, it does.
yeah, it
Yep,
makes a
sure
difference.
does. It sure does. Where do you get your ideas from for your stories?
They come they come from everywhere. It's so funny because one of the questions um I've been getting on questionnaires about American royalty is like, well, where did that idea come from? And it's this long convoluted story, but it's sort of how things work. It's like something will, so for example, for American royalty, I'll just answer that question. So i had been um I had been noticing the increase of media directed towards celebrities, right? So, like things like Entertainment Tonight used to be the only show that
I
was
know.
about movie stars, and it was like basically it was their movies that were coming out, and if they wanted to give you a tour of their house, or so, it was
Right.
that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. It was
Yeah.
very sort of what they wanted you to see and what they were promoting. And then it exploded into this entire industry where we had news shows about the lives of celebrities
Yeah.
that they weren't even like in on. So it wasn't that the celebrity had given you an interview, it was a show about musings about who they were dating and where they were going. And it went from like one show to a network to bunches of networks
Yeah.
to like there were magazines, like it exploded. So I noticed that and just thought that is crazy. Then the other thing that happened was Harry and Meghan, obviously.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I remember watching their wedding, getting up early for it, and noticing um, so I was watching the guests coming in, and it was like Serena Williams with her husband, and it was like Idris Elba with his wife, and it was so what I noticed was all the people were involved with other celebrities, right? Now it could be an actor was dating an actor, or a model was dating an athlete, or a musician was dating a model. But it just seemed like this incestuous world where they only dated and interacted with everyone else
Interesting.
within that own sphere.
Right, right,
And
right.
I thought to myself, it feels like they are our royalty. Like we follow them the way the British press follows the royal family. And
Hmm.
seeing them going to the wedding of an actual prince to an American actress seemed to be like the physical embodiment of that idea that there
Right,
was just this world of celebrity people, and they all interacted and we just watched from afar. That's all we did.
right.
So then the third thing that happened was Cardi B did this cover for Harper's Bazaar when she's in a ball gown and she's running away from a castle. And someone had tweeted that picture and said, I need this romance. I need the prince and a rapper romance. And my editor, you know, brilliant as she is, tagged me and said, I'm waiting. And I laughed because I was in the middle of another series, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh, this is so cute, whatever. Um, but all of those things just sort of swirled around. And so when I was thinking about a new series to write, one of the ideas I came up with was this idea. And the series idea was called American Royalty. And it was that idea that celebrities or whatever were our royalty. And the idea was going to be stories about the different spheres of celebrity interacting.
Right, right.
So one of the ideas I gave her, I said, so for example, maybe there's a story between an athlete and a musician, or maybe there's a story of an actual rapper and a prince. And and I sent that picture, and she was like, that story. I want that story. And I said, that's funny. You tagged me on that tweet. She didn't even remember it because
Oh,
it was like years ago. She didn't even remember it.
wow.
Um, that's how ideas work. And so something will come to me and I will jot it down on my notes pad. And when it comes time to be thinking about a new story, I might just go through and look and see what sparks something in me and go from there.
I have dreams.
Ooh,
I have dreams.
and
That's where
stories come to you and you're like formed, like
the plot is there.
yeah.
The hero, the heroine. Most of the time, I'm the heroine, and so I get the idea. We talked about your regimen. We talked about your critiquing. So I think I started to ask the themes in your books. Besides it being interracial love,
Mhm.
what are some of the other themes? What are the angsts that your characters go through?
I what I have discovered is I'm a big I said earlier that I really my stories are big on internal conflict.
Hmm.
And so I think a persistent theme throughout my stories is overcoming um childhood trauma, and
Okay.
not in the sense that of trauma like something may or may not have happened to them, but just the idea that sometimes the wounds that we have are formed from childhood issues, whether it's your parents divorced or someone passed away, um, or a belief that you formed
Right.
in
Right.
childhood. Those tend to be, I think, the strongest things that stick with us, and they impact our relationships whether we know it or not. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that I do in my stories is have that wound be something from back then. And then the idea is that the person they meet is a great person, but they've got to figure out this thing with them, or it's not going to work. I mean, I think
Right.
we see that, like, if issues come up over and over, and people tend to think, oh, well, it's that person, it's that person. And sometimes it's you, and it's the same issue, and it'll keep replaying itself in
Right.
different ways until you address it. And
Right.
in my stories, what happens is you meet a person that makes you want to fix it, because this is the person you want to be with.
Right. And
And
you,
yeah,
in order
so
to be, yeah.
that's a common,
Yeah.
thing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I have abandonment in my trilogy, and then I have in my current work in progress, I have like her father cheated on the mom, and
Mm,
then his dad walked out on them.
mm, right.
And because she's, in the Puerto Rican culture, if you're not married, you're, I mean, you could be an albatross. In the olden days, you were an albatross if you weren't married. I mean, you
Yeah,
could,
I understand.
yeah,
Yeah.
And so they treat her like she's a child, the family, even though her siblings are all younger than her,
Right.
and the mother is always protective of her. And um, so there's always that family dynamics, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're saying, you have no experience, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. So she keeps her distance from them. She
Mhm.
lives in Maryland, they live in New York, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
It's true. A big part of mine has to do with heroines who want control over their lives so much. Like, their thing is really about having control over decisions they make. And I know that's me all the way. And that comes from something as simple as when I was younger. I was born in Baltimore, and I lived in Baltimore until I was 10 or 11. And my parents decided we were going to move to this small town in Virginia. And no one asked me. No, I mean, like, they shouldn't. They made a decision that was best for the family, but it
right,
was very disruptive for me,
right.
so disruptive. And I didn't realize how much that affected me
Hmm.
until much later, until I started to look at the decisions I made in my life, and they were all about, I have to have control over these things,
Yeah,
because the last time a big thing happened to me where I felt like I didn't have control, and it
right,
really did affect me.
right.
Stuff comes out in what we write. It does.
Yeah,
It just
yeah.
does.
Yep, yep, yep. I get it. I get it. I mean, everybody's got stuff like that. My
Yeah.
father would argue with my mother. He'll be like, okay, you're going to stay with so and so while we're fighting, while we're arguing. And it's like, I would get
Yeah.
displaced. And
Yes.
now I have this issue where it's like, if you tell me, you have to do this, you have to go over there, I'm like, no, 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 no. You don't tell me where to go. I make my own decisions. It does.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it does
It
affect.
does.
It does. It does a number on you. People don't get it. You have to. Children are a blessing.
Yeah.
That's one. Okay. They're young people. They're little people. They have feelings. They have thoughts. They think.
Right.
They feel.
Right.
You have to take them into consideration.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a generation where the parents didn't care
Right.
what you thought, what you felt.
Thank
You're going to do what they want you to do.
you. That's right.
Yeah,
You better set that face. Sort of like, I don't care what's going on in your head, but it better not reflect on your face.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah,
Yep. And I would
yeah.
be like I'd be like, Dad, I think, oh, you know, what did I hear? Nothing. Okay. Yeah. Children should be seen, not heard. You know.
That was it.
Yeah. And that was
That
a
was it.
generational today,
Was.
you know.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Yeah.
But it was. So, I mean, I think all of that comes out, in our
Yeah.
stories. And I've just noticed that's a particular theme in mind.
Yeah. So do you go to conferences? Do you go to writing retreats? Are you a member of a lot of different writing groups?
Not anymore. So, obviously, with the pandemic, things are not what they used to be. But before, I was, like I said, RWA and specifically my chapter is the reason that I got published.
Right,
And
right.
I love being around other writers
Mhm.
because no one else understands
Right,
our life or how we think or what
right,
we go through or the
right.
things that are important to us. And so I was a member, of RWA. I made it, I volunteered for years. I made it to the national board.
Wow.
Happened. I stayed a member. I just let my membership go from that. Um, so I miss
Mhm.
that, but I've also made friends with a lot of writers. And I think, in the beginning when you don't know a lot of writers,
Mhm.
it's one thing, but I now have my community of writers, and so
Mhm.
I didn't need RWA for that.
Yeah,
But those connections are so important
yeah.
to me. I mean, I couldn't imagine doing what I do without writers around.
Right. I might get back to RWA because I want to join. I would like probably to go back and give WRW a chance.
Hmm.
I know there's a Maryland romance writers. I mentioned them to earlier,
Yeah.
but I don't know. They meet like on Thursdays and they meet early, I think. And then they meet, I don't know what town they're in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's hard for me to, get out of work early to go and drive down there.
Yeah.
And definitely I think there's a Virginia chapter.
Virginia is, yeah, they primarily met in Richmond. When I was there and got when I was on the board, I was president. We tried to move the meetings around a little because it wasn't Richmond romance writers, it was Virginia. And so we tried to move around a bit, but the organization had met in Richmond for such a long time that a lot of the core membership was in Richmond. And I was driving from an hour away. I know lots of people who were driving from hours away.
Wow.
Richmond people may not want to hear this, but they weren't always willing to drive
Right.
hours away to
Right.
other places.
Yeah.
So that would be a hike for you.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I also know there's a crime fiction writing group that also meets somewhere in Virginia. I don't know where. But they're closer. They're more towards the metropolitan area portion of
Okay.
Virginia. I'm
Okay.
not sure if I'm going to join that one, but I might give WRW another chance and see what they've
Yeah.
done. It's funny because I still get, stuff for like their workshops and stuff like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I still get the notices for the retreat, which they
Yeah.
decided not to do this year again.
Oh,
They're going to do something, not sure what. I kind of read it, but I can't remember whether it was going to be like an online thing, which will be interesting.
yeah.
Because how do you do? Well, I mean, you could pull it off, I guess.
People have been doing them, but and one of my kids is immunocompromised, and so we were very
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
locked down, and I know mask mandates are lifting. I'm still very
Oh, no, I still go out.
cautious about it,
Yeah,
but I do know people they're getting tired of virtual things when they feel that they can be in person. You know
right,
what I'm saying? It's one
right,
thing when everything is locked down and this was the only way that you could communicate. They were happy to go to virtual online conferences, but I feel that now that things are opening up and people are meeting in person, I think people are sort of like, I
ready.
would much rather.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree to a certain extent. What's next for Tracy?
Well, Tracy, I am finishing up the next book. When will this come out?
This video,
Yes.
this one, probably the first week in May.
Okay.
When does your next book come out?
This book comes out June 28th. So I'm working on the book I'm writing after this book. That's what I will say.
Right.
So
Do you want me to hold I can hold it for
no, no,
you.
no,
Okay.
no, no. You don't have to hold it. I just didn't know what I should say or not say about what the next book was going to be. And so I'm
Um,
going to err on the side of just saying that, there is a second book in the series. I am writing the second book in the series.
okay. And that's the one that's going to come out in June?
No, this one comes out in June.
Okay.
American Royalty comes out in
Oh,
June.
it's not out yet?
No, it's not out yet. No, but I can send you the digital arc. I was going to tell you that.
I thought I went on Amazon and I saw it and I was going to
You
get
might,
it.
it's up for pre-order, but it's not out.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. See,
it's
I
not out.
hate doing Amazon on my phone because it doesn't tell me everything.
Yeah, it's not out yet, but I can send you the arc for that. That's not a problem.
Yeah. Are you
Um,
sending it to me? The cover.
yes,
Yeah, I have the cover.
yes, yes, but I can send you the digital arc if you want.
Oh, cool. That'd be cool. Yeah,
Yes.
I can read. Is that what's the purpose? So let's talk about that
Yeah.
one more question. What's the purpose of the arc? Just for people, readers and writers that don't know. Uh,
So the ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copies, and those are the copies that go out to. In the past, it just used to be to reviewers,
okay.
and if they're selling your books to different accounts. So like the bookstores, the big stores, those copies go to those people so they can read it and make a decision about whether they want to buy your book for their store, and for reviewers who are going to review your book. Now, because of social media and we have book influencers, the copy goes out to them too, so that they can read it in advance and review your book.
Oh, cool.
So it's usually based on, it's not the final version, so it'll say like uncorrected proof, or most, I think most people now know that if it's an ARC, it's an uncorrected proof.
Okay.
It's usually your copy edited version, but it's not like the line edits version.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what's the difference between line edits and because I've had people ask the question about the difference between an editor, copy editor.
Oh, so many. Right. There's
Line,
so many parts. Yeah.
yeah.
So my editor is kind of like my developmental editor, which means she gives me notes on the actual story. So stuff
Okay.
about my heroine, my hero, how they come across when she reads it, if there are plot holes, if there are threads or things that I did
Wow.
not tie up or drop. Yes, thank you. Those are the notes she gives. A copy editor goes through and looks at things like your timing. So, like the timeline of your story. You said that she got here in London in early June, but in chapter 12, you said that it was now July, but it's only been 3 weeks. Like stuff like that. They go into the maneuver.
Right.
You said the person's name was this in chapter 2, but in chapter 5 you said this. What's I've gotten some interesting ones. Sometimes it'll be like this was a good one. When I wrote the book American Royalty, I referenced the basketball arena in Los Angeles. It was Staples Center. Well, now it's now I think is it crypto.com arena, I think it is. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it changed between when I wrote it and when the book comes out. So one of the things the copy editor said was, this is now changed. Do you want to
Wow.
change it in the book? Stuff like that. And then
Good.
the line edit is you going through and reading. And you know how you said like you
Wow.
can read it so many times and still catch stuff. There are words that spell check won't get because two TOO is the same as TWO is the same as TO.
Right.
So you're reading and going through and seeing stuff like that.
Wow.
Those are like the different.
It's
Yeah. So by the time I get line edits, I hate this book. I'm like, I can't read this book one more time. I can't. I can't do it. I'm
oh
sorry.
my gosh. Wow. It's a big it's a big job, you
It
know.
is.
Yeah,
Yes.
especially, you want it to go out as perfect as possible.
Yes, if you want it to be the best, the best that it can be,
Yeah,
it does,
got to go through all that. Yeah,
it does.
I see that's a big deal for self-published if they don't have the budget for those
Yeah,
kinds of things, you risk
it is.
a
I mean,
lot.
if you don't have the budget, it's like an investment. And
Yeah.
people, like you said, this is not what you do to get rich. We are not
Mhm.
doing this. I think sometimes people get into it thinking that's what it
Right.
is, and
Yeah,
then
yes, they have that
they learn.
mentality.
Yeah,
I do it because I have them in my head, the
yeah,
stories. And I do get a kick out of world building, creating, even if it doesn't have to be like a big science fiction world, it could be a Regency estate, a manor in,
right.
England somewhere. And the characters and the angst, the problems, the inner conflicts, it's just, it's very powerful,
Yeah,
and that's why I do it. And of course, I also hope people like it.
yeah.
When they read it, they enjoy it.
Yeah, I do too. It's funny when people will comment. I mean, because they have access to us in a way that they didn't before, and every time I'm like, this makes my day. Like this never gets old. Someone saying, "I enjoy what your
Yeah,
story. I enjoy
yeah,
what you wrote. This made
yeah.
me feel something." It never gets old.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, and that's why I was saying that when they said, "Oh, I don't like Margaret,"
Right.
I'm like, "Oh, cool, okay," because you're supposed to hate her. I
Right.
did the job. I'm,
Right. You
the
did your
job.
job.
I did
Right.
the job. Margaret is a hateable character in the
Right.
beginning, but
Right.
then you start to feel sorry for her, and then she learns, she grows. With each
Right, which is what you want. We do our job, like you said, that is what's supposed to happen. There
exactly.
should be a change. Yeah.
Exactly. So okay, so now American Royalty comes out in June,
Yes.
and then you're working on another one
Working on the second book in the series.
of the American Royalty series.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. Do you have a
Yes.
name for it yet? A ti-
We are not releasing yet.
Okay, gotcha.
So yes.
No problem.
Yes.
Understood.
Yes. Hopefully, that book will come out next year. And then I have the Girls Trip series, which was the series that got
Yeah.
interrupted by
Mhm.
this series because my
Yeah.
editor loved this idea. I have two more books in the series, and so my intent is to finish those two.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah,
I looked at two of them, and there was one that I was like, "Oh, I'd like to check that one out too." Um, what lovers do, or what lovers talk.
like lovers do. So
Like love.
sweet talking lover, and then like lovers do.
Yeah, I'm interested in like lovers do, so I might check that one out after American Royalty.
Okay.
So, yeah, definitely. Well, I want to thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to join us here. I will send you the final edited version of the interview for you to look at and approve. And I hope to have you next year.
I
Uh,
would love to.
yeah, as you do more books because things change.
Yeah.
The industry changes all the time. So, and hopefully I'll get better at making these videos.
Oh, they're good. No, they're good.
Thank you for visiting A Writer's Perspective. I hope you enjoyed our visit with Tracey Livesay. For more on Tracey, please check out the description box below for links to her website and books. And please don't forget to subscribe for future notifications on other interviews coming up in May, June, and for the rest of the year. In the meantime, keep on reading and writing.